Absolutely. Here is Section 1. The Evolutionary Memory of Darkness, written with a minimum of 700 words. Hashtag Section 1. The Evolutionary Memory of Darkness. Before humanity ever built fires or cities, before we even stood fully upright, darkness was our constant companion. It surrounded the ancient forests we crept through, filled the caves we sheltered in, and blanketed the world when the sun slipped below the horizon. To modern people, darkness often triggers fear, a fear amplified by horror films, crime statistics, and childhood nightmares. But if we peel back the cultural layers and examine our biological and evolutionary roots, the truth becomes clear. Humans don't truly fear the dark. We come from it. Our very survival depended on it. Long before we walked upright or used tools, our mammalian ancestors were largely nocturnal. During the reign of dinosaurs, small mammals survived by being active at night, hiding from predators and scavenging in the cover of darkness. This ancient behavior is embedded in our biology. Although we eventually became more diurnal, day active, remnants of our night-dwelling past remain. Our pupils widen dramatically in the dark to absorb more light, and we retain a high density of rod cells in our retinas, allowing us to detect movement and shapes in low-light environments. Even our brains respond differently in darkness, with heightened sensitivity and alertness, not panic, but awareness. Our evolutionary journey continued in environments where darkness was not only present, but inescapable. Prehistoric humans often slept in caves, deep, silent, pitch-black places. To our ancestors, the cave was safety. It offered protection from predators, harsh weather, and even spiritual grounding. Fire came later. Its warmth and light provided comfort, but it didn't replace darkness. It simply created a space within it. In fact, early humans didn't attempt to banish the dark. They learned to live with it, and in many cases, embraced it. Night was when stories were told. Myths were born in the flicker of firelight surrounded by deep shadow. Our minds learned to associate darkness not just with danger, but with imagination, bonding, and introspection. Modern science is just beginning to catch up with what our ancestors intuitively understood. Darkness is not just absence, it's presence. In sensory deprivation studies, participants who spend prolonged time in darkness often describe a unique, even comforting experience. Freed from constant visual input, the brain turns inward, activating dreamlike states of thought, deep memory recall, and emotional processing. Far from being a terrifying void, darkness becomes a kind of mental landscape, fertile, mysterious, and ancient. There's also evidence to suggest that our internal systems still thrive best in the absence of light. Melatonin, the hormone that regulates our sleep and repair cycles, is only released in darkness. Even a small amount of artificial light can disrupt this natural rhythm, leading to insomnia, anxiety, and other health issues. Yet for the vast majority of our history, the absence of light was a natural state, one that helped synchronize us with the Earth's rotation, the moon's cycles, and seasonal patterns. We lived by starlight and moonlight, not screens and LEDs. From an evolutionary psychology perspective, darkness is not a foreign threat but a familiar space, one that demands presence, awareness, and humility. When walking through a forest at night, it's not the darkness itself that frightens us, it's our lack of understanding about what lies within it. But that fear is learned, conditioned by stories, horror tropes, and a culture that idolizes constant visibility and control. Our ancestors didn't fear the unknown in the same way. They respected it, and they knew that sometimes survival meant trusting their instincts in the dark rather than relying on what they could see. Even the act of dreaming, a nightly journey through the subconscious, takes place in internal darkness. Our brains simulate entire worlds while our eyes are closed. This speaks to a deeper connection. Darkness is not just external, it is part of how we process life, make sense of reality, and prepare for the next day. If darkness were truly our enemy, it wouldn't cradle us in sleep. There's a poetic truth in all of this. We began in darkness, not just as species, but as individuals. The womb is a place of total dark. In that black, fluid-filled chamber. We grow, develop, and prepare for life. The first light we see at birth is a contrast to the shadowy safety we knew for months. And many describe death as returning to darkness. In this way, our entire human experience, from prehistory to the present, from birth to death, is framed by darkness. It's not something to run from. It's something to understand, respect, and even reclaim. So when we say humans don't fear the dark, we come from it, it's not just poetic rhetoric. It's biological, psychological, and ancestral truth. The darkness is not our enemy. It is our origin. Let me know if you'd like me to continue with Section 2, F, or if you'd like an image to match this theme, F, or a short story adaptation, F, of this section. Absolutely. Here is Section 2, Cultural Myths, Darkness as Power, Not Fear, written with a minimum of 700 words. Hashtag Section 2, Cultural Myths, Darkness as Power, Not Fear. Throughout history, civilizations across the globe have woven darkness into the very fabric of their myths, religions, and cultural beliefs, not as a symbol of evil, but as a representation of mystery, creation, and untapped power. In a world before artificial light, the dark was a regular and inescapable part of daily life. Rather than fearing it, our ancestors found meaning in it. They saw the night as a gateway, a sacred threshold, a realm of gods and spirits, often as revered as those of the day. To understand humanity's relationship with darkness, we must look at how cultures shaped it and how, in turn, it shaped them. One of the most compelling examples of darkness as power comes from ancient creation myths. Nearly every culture begins its cosmic story not in light, but in shadow. In Egyptian mythology, the universe began as a dark, boundless ocean called Nun, from which all life emerged. In Hindu cosmology, the primordial state is a timeless, dark void, chaos, from which Brahma, the creator god, was born. Even in Genesis from the Bible, darkness was upon the face of the deep before God said, "Let there be light." The world was not created from light. Light was created from darkness. Darkness, then, is not merely a passive background, but the original force from which all form emerges. These ideas were not just abstract. Ancient peoples personified darkness in their deities. The Greeks revered Nyx, the goddess of the night, as one of the most powerful and oldest beings in their pantheon. Even Zeus feared her. Nyx wasn't depicted as evil. She was regal, mysterious, and primal. Her Roman counterpart, Nox, carried similar weight. In Hinduism, Kali, the goddess of time, death, and transformation, is often represented in dark blue or black skin. She is a fearsome yet liberating force, one who destroys illusions and ego, not to harm but to bring spiritual rebirth. Darkness, in these traditions, is not absence. It is depth. In African cosmologies, such as the Dogon people of Mali, the void is considered full of potential, a sacred womb from which existence is constantly born. In these belief systems, darkness is not a place where good dies, but where life begins. Similarly, many Native American traditions treat the night not as evil but as a powerful space for ceremony, dreaming, and communion with the unseen world. For the Lakota, night is the time for visions. For the Navajo, the dark sky is a sacred map, guiding life and destiny. The shift from reverence to fear is a relatively modern development. As cities grew and artificial light became widespread, people grew physically and psychologically distanced from true darkness. With this distance came distortion. Media, particularly in the West, began equating darkness with horror, monsters hiding in shadows, evil lurking in the black. But these depictions are cultural constructions, not innate truths. In fact, studies show that children raised without exposure to horror imagery often show less fear of the dark. The association is taught, not inherited. Ironically, the deeper psychological and spiritual traditions of both East and West have always recognized that facing the dark is essential for wholeness. In Jungian psychology, the shadow represents the parts of ourselves we suppress or deny. It's not inherently evil, It's simply unknown. According to Carl Jung, integrating the shadow is a vital step toward personal transformation. The dark within us must be acknowledged and embraced, not feared or buried. In this sense, our inner myths echo the old outer ones. Growth begins in darkness. Eastern philosophies have similar insights. In Taoism, light and dark are inseparable, represented in the yin-yang symbol. Yin, the dark side, is not negative. It's intuitive, restful, deep, and essential. One cannot exist without the other. Darkness is the counterbalance that gives light its meaning. To reject darkness is to live in imbalance. Even in modern art and literature, darkness is often reclaimed as a realm of truth and transformation. From Dante's journey through the dark wood in the Divine Comedy to Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, entering the unknown is a metaphor for self-discovery. It is in the dark where the hero confronts trials, questions identity, and ultimately evolves. Importantly, darkness has also historically been a place of safety for those persecuted. Escaping slaves used the cover of night to find freedom along the Underground Railroad. Resistance fighters met in secret under the stars. The night protected, shielded, and nurtured revolution. Far from being evil, darkness was the mother of liberation. In the end, myths reflect a truth deeper than rational thought. And for most of human history, they told us that darkness is not to be feared but honored. It is the origin of creation, the space of potential, the temple of transformation. It is not the enemy of light, but its equal, and perhaps its source. Would you like me to now write Section 3F of this article, help create a matching dark-themed image, F, or turn this section into a narrative short story or monologue, F?
Certainly.
Here's Section 3, Biological Bonds. Our bodies remember the dark, written with a minimum of 700 words. Hashtag Section 3, Biological Bonds. Our bodies remember the dark. While myths and culture reflect our symbolic relationship with darkness, our bodies tell a more primal, undeniable truth. We are biologically wired to live with, adapt to, and even thrive in darkness. Evolution has inscribed in our flesh and neurons a long-standing partnership with the night. Long before electricity, neon, or LED screens, human biology evolved in sync with the cycles of light and dark. And even now, in a world saturated by artificial light, our bodies, quietly, persistently, remember the dark. Let's begin with one of the most obvious connections, our circadian rhythm. This internal 24-hour clock governs everything from our sleep cycles to hormone production, metabolism, and even mood. The engine behind the system is light, or more precisely, the absence of it. In darkness, our bodies release melatonin, a hormone that signals to our systems that it's time to rest and repair. This process is ancient, deep-rooted, and essential. Just a few hours of artificial light exposure at night, especially blue light from screens, can disrupt melatonin production, throwing off the entire rhythm of sleep and waking. The result? Insomnia, irritability, fatigue, and even long-term health consequences like depression or weakened immunity. But the story goes deeper. Our pupils, the black portals at the center of our eyes, are designed to dilate and contract based on light exposure. In total darkness, they expand to let in every available photon. This isn't just an adaptation to help us see, it's a signal that our bodies are preparing for night mode. Rod cells, which make up over 95% of the photoreceptors in our retinas, are specifically designed for low-light vision. These rods don't detect color, but are incredibly sensitive to movement and changes in contrast, essential traits for surviving in the dark. In other words, while we may not have the night vision of a cat, our eyes are surprisingly well-equipped for low-light navigation. There are even populations of humans today who retain extraordinary night-adaptive abilities. For instance, the Moken people of Southeast Asia, sometimes called sea nomads, have adapted to see clearly underwater in low-light conditions. Their eyes adjust in ways that most humans have lost through modern, light-saturated living. Studies of hunter-gatherer tribes like the Hadza of Tanzania have shown that without artificial lighting, these communities naturally shift into a polyphasic sleep pattern, resting in the dark in multiple phases through the night and early morning. Their bodies are still harmonized with the ancient dark light cycles of the earth. And it's not just about vision. Darkness impacts the brain in powerful ways. When visual input is reduced, other senses often become sharper, not just as a compensation but as a neural shift. Sound becomes clearer, spatial awareness heightens, and touch grows more sensitive. This multisensory tuning is part of what allowed our ancestors to hunt, navigate, and survive in the wild long after sunset. The brain's amygdala, responsible for detecting threats, becomes more alert in the dark, but not necessarily panicked. Darkness increases our sensitivity, our attentiveness, our awareness of the world around us. Yet, in modern life, many people have almost completely removed true darkness from their lives. We flood our nights with streetlights, screen glow, LED clocks, and headlights. Even our bedrooms often hum with artificial light sources. But what if this overexposure isn't just unnatural, but damaging? Studies in chronobiology and sleep science show that light pollution is directly tied to rising mental health disorders, including anxiety, depression, and cognitive dysfunction. Night shift workers, exposed to light at all hours, face significantly higher risks of heart disease, obesity, and cancer. It's as if stripping darkness from our lives strips away part of our humanity, part of our natural design. We may have invented the light bulb, but our genes haven't caught up. They still crave the rhythm of dusk, the silence of night, the mystery of shadow. There's also something profoundly human about our experience in the womb, where we begin life in complete darkness. The fetal environment is warm, sound-muffled, pressure-balanced, and black. It is in that shadowy sanctuary that we grow, develop, and prepare for the external world. Darkness, in this sense, is the first and deepest safety we ever know. From that experience, a neurological imprint remains. When we close our eyes, retreat into silence, and remove stimulation, the body enters a kind of calm that mimics the prenatal state. Sleep researchers have found that people rest more deeply in rooms with absolute darkness, and even partial light during sleep, such as from a phone notification or nearby streetlight, reduces REM sleep and dream clarity. And speaking of dreams, those vast, surreal worlds our brains conjure every night, they too arise from darkness. When the eyes close and the conscious mind lets go, the brain paints entire realities on a canvas of black. It is in that darkness that trauma is processed, memory is consolidated, and creative thought is born. Far from being a passive state, darkness activates some of the most essential human processes. Darkness, then, is not just part of the environment. It is embedded in our biology, woven into our senses, reflected in our hormones, and carried in our cells. To fear the dark is to forget our origins. To return to it, in rest, in reflection, in respect, is to remember who we are. Would you like me to continue with Section 4, F, or would you prefer a visual representation of these biological bonds, F, or maybe a short documentary-style script, F, based on this section? Certainly. Here's Section 4, Reclaiming the Dark, the Future of Human Connection with Darkness, written with a minimum of 700 words. Hashtag Section 4, Reclaiming the Dark, the Future of Human Connection with Darkness. In the modern world, darkness has become an endangered experience. Cities never sleep. Streetlights burn through the night. Neon signs, phone screens, and television glow fill even our private spaces with constant illumination. We have banished the dark, not because it was dangerous, but because we misunderstood it. And yet, our biology, our history, and our inner lives all whisper the same message. We belong to the dark, and it belongs to us. As humanity looks toward a future shaped by overstimulation, digital exhaustion, and environmental degradation, one act of resistance may be surprisingly simple: reclaiming the dark. The first step is recognizing how artificial light has severed us from the natural world. Light pollution is no longer just an aesthetic concern. It is a health crisis, an ecological disruptor, and a spiritual impoverishment. Most people living in urban environments have never seen a truly dark sky, not the Milky Way spilling across the heavens, not the meteor showers streaking in silence, not the deep void that reveals our place in the cosmos. The night sky, once a source of awe, myth, and navigation, has been reduced to a hazy orange dome. In this loss, something essential has been taken, not just beauty, but perspective. Artificial lighting also affects wildlife in devastating ways. Birds become disoriented during migration. Sea turtles, guided by moonlight to the ocean, are drawn toward hotel floodlights and highways. Nocturnal animals lose their feeding patterns. Entire ecosystems suffer because of our collective fear of darkness. By reclaiming dark spaces, through initiatives like dark sky reserves, night sanctuaries, and urban light curfews, we're not just healing the environment, we're restoring a natural rhythm that every living thing, including ourselves, depends on. But reclaiming the dark isn't only about ecology, it's also about psychology. Constant exposure to artificial light, especially blue light, contributes to anxiety, depression, sleep disorders, and chronic stress. As people grow more dependent on devices and overstimulated by digital input, the simple act of sitting in darkness becomes therapeutic. Meditation in darkness, for example, enhances introspection and calms the nervous system. Some retreat centers now offer darkness therapy, extended periods in total blackness, allowing the mind to reset, heal, and dream. Darkness, it turns out, doesn't isolate us. It reconnects us, internally and externally. There's a growing cultural movement to reframe the way we view night. Artists, writers, and thinkers are reclaiming the dark as a space of beauty, not fear. Photographer Thierry Cohen creates composite images showing what major cities would look like without light pollution, haunting, star-filled versions of familiar skylines. Writers like Paul Bogard, author of The End of Night, argue that darkness is not just vanishing from the sky, but from the human soul. And spiritual leaders from multiple traditions now emphasize stillness, silence, and shadow as necessary components of wholeness. In daily life, anyone can begin to reintegrate darkness. This could be as simple as turning off all lights 30 minutes before bed, replacing white bulbs with warm, red-toned ones in the evening, or spending more time outdoors after sunset. Not to rush, but to feel the shift from light to dark. It could mean sleeping in total darkness, without glowing clocks, screens, or hallway lights. Or walking through a forest at night, not with fear, but with quiet awareness. These practices aren't superstitions, they're reconnections to an ancient part of being human. Spiritually, reclaiming the dark can also mean embracing our own internal shadow. In a world obsessed with positivity, brightness, and visibility, we're often discouraged from acknowledging sadness, fear, or complexity. But true self-understanding requires stepping into the inner night, not to get lost, but to find the unseen parts of ourselves. Darkness, in this sense, becomes a teacher. It shows us what cannot be found in the light. In a time when everything is constantly illuminated, every corner of our cities, every moment of our lives through social media, darkness offers us something radical: privacy, pause, depth. It allows the unseen to exist. It gives the soul a place to breathe. And perhaps most importantly, the dark reminds us that we are part of something bigger. When we stare into a dark sky and see stars from thousands of years ago, when we dream in a room without light, or when we close our eyes and feel peace instead of panic, we reconnect with the oldest truth of all. We are creatures of the dark. We were born in it. We grew in it. And we still carry it inside us. The future of human health, spirituality, and ecological awareness may very well depend on how we relate to the dark. Will we continue to drown it out, fearing what it might reveal? Or will we step into it with reverence and remember that from darkness, all things, including us, begin? Let me know if you'd like a full 2,800-word combined document, F, a visual summary image, F, or perhaps an audio script version, F, of the entire article.